Hello. Stories are an important part of being human, and understanding which stories were told by our ancestors allows us to understand their views on particular parts of life. And in this video, which is the second in a series of videos about the oldest stories of humanity, I'm going to look at some of the oldest folktales and fairy tales told by our Proto European ancestors and see what they can tell us about how our ancestors lived. So welcome to the oldest folktales of the Proto Europeans, and welcome to Crecganford. Before I begin, I've explained in part 1 of the video series, it gives an account of how we know these stories are old and their origins. And if you haven't watched part 1 of the series, then I'll link that here now if you want to understand the process more fully. But in a synopsis, in very much layman terms, by using DNA evidence, it can help us track cultures and tribes through their migration. And alongside language trees, which show how language evolves, we can apply an index of story types called the ATU, or the Arna-Thompson-Uther Index. And putting all these together, we can make a good estimate of where a story originated and the age of that story. And this analysis was applied to the 275 magical folk tales that are in the ATU. And the result was that 100 of the tales seemed old, coming from an oral tradition. And 4 of these seem to originate from the time of the Proto Indo Europeans, making them potentially over 6,000 years old, maybe even 7,500 years old in one particular case. Now, these 4 stories were The Smith and the Devil, The Animal Bride, The Grateful Animals, and The Boy Who Stole the Ogre's Treasure. And in the first video, we looked at what this meant, what these stories meant in terms of the importance of them, and it highlighted metallurgy and looking after animals, and the benefits these must have brought to people in those times. But the research also found that 10 other stories looked as though they originated as the Proto-Europeans migrated through Europe. So maybe not as old as the Proto-Indo-European stories, but still at least 4,000 years old, and perhaps even as old as 6,000 years, which links them to the Proto-Italic Celtic and the Proto-Italic Celtic Germanic and the Proto-Western Europeans. And today we will look at some of these stories to see if they can help us understand more about how the Proto-Europeans thought and lived. And when looking at these stories, we have to put ourselves in a mindset of a Proto-European. When understanding a story was important to help guide acceptable behaviours in a world where there was no formal constitution. An oral tradition played a key role in knowledge transfer within a tribe, and so these stories and their true meaning were probably understood far more readily when originally told many thousands of years ago. But let's see what we can uncover. The first of these 10 I will look at is a story called Beauty and the Beast. Now this is a story that is definitely aimed at the females of a tribe, as it is in effect the telling of a female fantasy. And if you don't know the story, an abridged version goes a bit like this. A young girl gets lost in a forest and finds a castle belonging to a beast who seems a bit grumpy and angry with life. And she is scared and feels trapped, and through various plot twists manages to swap places with her father as a prisoner of the beast. And this allows her to go back home, and in her home village her suitor, a strong, popular man with the other ladies, says he will kill the beast. But then she realises through more plot twists that the beast isn't such a bad person, and there's a little scuffle, the beast gets hurt, and Beauty nurses him better and realises she is in love with him. And when she acknowledges this, then the beast turns into a prince and they all live happily ever after, apart from her original suitor, who doesn't get the girl. And this story is the presentation of the average female's psychological preference for a man. And what I mean by this is that the beast here is showing predatory dominance, and Beauty encounters this mysterious and aggressive male and tames him. Beauty is in effect representing woman who isn't interested in a man who isn't the beast. She wants to get the beast to make him love her. She wants to pacify his beastness, his anger. And this is actually a common fantasy amongst women today. With findings by Google engineers who study what people search for on the internet, they did some analysis trying to find out what women looked for and women wanted erotic romances, and they wanted them featuring vampires, werewolves, surgeons, pirates and billionaires. Which may make you realise why vampire movies and Pirates of the Caribbean and 50 Shades of Grey do so well. This is a story that telling of an inherent desire of a woman that has lasted millennia to find a bad boy and tame him. Yes, that is a scenario that has been played out for thousands of years, and that is what Beauty and the Beast is about. The next story we can look at is known as the Supernatural Helper, and is a version we tell today of a story called Rumpelstiltskin. The story in summary goes as follows. One day a father boasts to a king that his daughter can spin gold out of straw, in the hope the king will marry her. But the daughter can't and is locked up, and there makes a deal with a little magical man who can. But the king keeps asking for more golden thread to be spun, and the daughter eventually has to promise to give the little man her firstborn child. Meanwhile, the king is so happy with all the gold the man's daughter has produced that he marries her, and as if by magic she becomes pregnant and has a child. The little man turns up saying, "I'm going to take your child unless you can guess my name." Now, the queen, or the daughter, who's now a queen, is desperate to find out his name, and on the third day he's given her, the little man is spotted by one of her guards singing and dancing and saying his name. And the guard tells the queen, and when the little man comes to collect the baby, the queen says his name is Rumpelstiltskin. And in anger, and due to a dodgy floorboard, he stamps his foot, which flips up a floorboard and splits him in two. And everyone, apart from Rumpelstiltskin, lives happily ever after. So what's this story about? Because it isn't particularly obvious. And, well, the name Rumpelstiltskin means little rattle stilt, and is named after a goblin that makes noises. But this version with the goblin is a younger version of the actual source tale. And there are similar versions to Rumpelstiltskin told in many countries across the world. In England it's called Tom Tit Tot. In Scotland it's called Story, and Gilly Trut in Ireland. The versions are found, everywhere. And so we mustn't get distracted from these new versions. Instead, if we break the story down, what we have are three men, the father, the daughter, the king and the little man, all of who are acting foolishly, have overconfidence, wanting something that needs a miracle to happen. And the cost of this is, certainly to the daughter, significant. She is locked up, potentially losing her first child. But here we also see she overcomes these issues through being alert, finding information to protect herself, and thus the story is focusing again towards women, particularly daughters in a patriarchal society, who must use their influence and knowledge to protect themselves and their children from the actions and desires of foolish men. In effect, be alert, be informed, and then you will have yourself some protection in a world where others are trying to dictate your path. The third tale we will look at today is Godfather Death. And it's an interesting tale about a man who was looking for a godfather for his son, sometimes called a foster father by some cultures. He goes out for a walk and bumps into God and into the devil, as you do, but rejects both of them for being his godfather, but also bumps into Death. And he allows Death to be his son's godfather. Death makes his godson into a famous doctor and tells him that when he visits his patients, Death will appear standing by the head or the foot of the patient. And if he stands at the head of a patient, the patient will live. And if he stands at the feet of a patient, the patient will die. So time passes and the doctor is called to see the king who's very ill. And there Death is standing at the king's feet. So the doctor knows there's an impending death due of the king. But the doctor turns the king around and tricks Death and keeps the king alive. Now Death tells the doctor not to trick him again or the doctor himself will die. And the king is happy with the doctor for what he has done and allows the doctor to marry his daughter, who herself then becomes ill, which is a bit suspicious, but it's not part of the story. Anyway, Death appears standing by her feet, suggesting death is imminent. And the doctor again turns her around in the bed so her head is by Death, suggesting she will live. And after this, Death takes the doctor, his godson, to a cave and shows him how he knows how long people live. and shows the doctor his lifeline, which then is very, very short. Death's godson pleads for an extension of life, but Death watches his godson's life disappear and the godson dies. Now this story has a number of forms, and whilst you might like to think it is about death, it actually isn't. The motif here is about not to trick people into making an outcome you don't deserve. Don't cheat, as if you do and it is found out, then there will be a price to pay, and that price could take away more from you than you would have received when you cheated, potentially leaving you with nothing. It's a tale about being honest and not cheating, which is an absolute must in life. You don't lie. Again, a message that most modern day psychologists would iterate to you if you wanted to be a better person. Now, the penultimate tale I'm going to look at today is how the devil married 3 sisters. And there are other similar tales called Fitcher's Bird and Rescued by Sister. In fact, there are 22 tales of this type in the ATU index, and so it's a very popular folktale type. The plot is that a man kidnaps 3 sisters, one at a time, and each one he takes back to his castle and gives them the keys to his castle so they can wander around wherever they want, and an egg. But then they're also told to go wherever they want, but not to look behind one particular door. The first 2 sisters look behind the door and are shocked at what they see and drop the egg, which leaves a clue that they were there. And when the kidnapper finds out, he kills them. The third sister doesn't drop her egg when she looks behind the door and finds her 2 sisters there and revives them and escapes. And the man's castle is destroyed for his crimes, with probably the man in it. Now, whilst this tale has curiosity and its consequences as a theme, think of Eve and the snake and the apple in the Garden of Eden, there are a number of tales in this category that do that. The main theme here is that you're not guilty of a transgression if it is for the greater good, but just don't get caught doing it. Be careful, be curious, find out information, but don't be obvious about it. Maintain a low profile. Those who stand out get picked on. Again, a common understood concept in modern psychology. The final tale I look at in this video, although I will mention the rest of the 10 tales after this one, but the last one I look at in detail in this video is called The Lazy Boy, and it's also known as Foolish Hands or Peter the Fool or Lazy Jack. It is about a boy who completes some tasks, but he keeps losing his rewards when he goes home afterwards. And his final reward for work in a week is a donkey, and he doesn't want to lose this, so he carries it home. And this makes a rich lady who was mute laugh at him, and she finds the power of speech, and so they marry, have kids, and live happily ever after, until one dies. So here, looking after what you earn is important, no matter how you look after it, because if you do, people will find the fact you can earn an attractive proposition, that you have potential. And this is especially true in the times of the Proto European culture. A woman is looking for a man with potential, and they will find them capable and attractive. And once more, a modern psychologist will underline the fact that women looking for a man will find a poor man with potential more attractive than a rich man who's boring. The other stories that were uncovered by this analysis are called Friends in Life and Death, The Grateful Dead, The Clever Horse, sometimes called Ferdinand the Faithful and Ferdinand the Unfaithful, and then there is Dance Among Thorns, and finally Strong John, sometimes called Strong Hands. Now, I've also received a few requests from viewers to look at other tales, so I'll cover all these in a future video, so keep an eye out for those. But let's summarise what we found out. These stories that are thousands of years old focus on qualities of a person to get a husband or wife, to stay honest, to be curious, but not to stand out. These are qualities that are still applicable today, and to find they were being told so much and so widespread all that time ago just makes me believe that our ancestors really knew about what made people work, something I feel we don't really talk about so much today comparatively. But the other piece of advice that all your men out there looking for a woman may want to follow is I suggest you aim to become a billionaire or a surgeon, or if that fails, a pirate. because becoming a werewolf or vampire is probably a little more challenging career-wise. And with that, I hope you enjoyed that walkthrough of some of the oldest folk tales we know. Please stay safe and take care. And this was Crecganford.